What's going on, Z Community Cuties? It's your boy Azizz Finance, and welcome back to the Personal Finance in Canada show, also known as the PFC show. Whether you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, or this is your first time, be sure that you're either following or subscribe to the pod, and share this with somebody who you think will also get value from this podcast as well. Now, without further ado, let's get this party started and dive into the episode. By listening to the PFC show, the Personal Finance in Canada show with Azizz Finance, you acknowledge and agree that me, Azizz Finance, assume no responsibility for any financial decision or decisions that you make, as it is ultimately your finances and you are the only controller of your own decisions. I am a random person on the internet and not a financial professional, so please consult with one being a financial professional before making any financial-based decision, because anything that you hear on this podcast, overall, each and every single episode, is just a sharing of my experience and are not suggestions whatsoever, regardless of the types of language or words that I use within these episodes. Again, by listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that I assume no responsibility for any decisions that you make regarding your finances. Alright, so just in case that you guys liked our last episode, which touched up on an option strategy called the covered call, this episode is going to be focused on another strategy called the cash secured put. Now, for starters, if you haven't listened to the covered call episode, be sure that you do, and if you have any questions, let me know. But the reason that I say this is because cash secured puts are literally the exact same thing as covered calls, just with a few minor details. And within this episode, we're only going to be talking about the differences to make the most efficient use of your time. Now, dissecting the strategy name, cash secured puts. The cash secured aspect of this strategy refers to the fact that when you deploy this specific strategy, you have a cash reserve within your trading account in the case where you get assigned this options play. Puts, on the other hand, just references the type of option that you'll be dealing with within the strategy, being a put contract. Now, the combined strategy of a cash secured put refers to the selling of a put contract. Doing this, it results in you receiving a premium, which is why this strategy is considered to be one of the most popular ones, as it gives you instant cash within your account, which is already a pretty big pro, although this pro usually blinds us from the potential risks associated with the strategy. The first risk that you could potentially face is early assignment. Now, when you're selling a put, it is the same thing as selling any type of options contract. You're basically putting yourself at the mercy of an option buyer, as they have the power to come up to you at any time and essentially force you, in this case, to buy the stock at the strike price that you sold the contract at. Early assignment would usually happen when the put buyer decides that they want to force you to buy the stock before expiration happens, which can put you in a pretty bad situation, as you can end up buying the stock at an unfavorable price, or overall just buying the stock when that wasn't your intention in the first place. This is why the cash secured part comes into play, because you need to make sure that you have enough cash within your account in the case where it does happen, or you'll have to face the severe consequences of struggling to deposit potentially hundreds, if not thousands of dollars into your account within a severely short time frame. To actually avoid this risk, I would employ something called the wheel strategy. Now, the wheel strategy encompasses both cash secured puts along with covered calls, and it is called the wheel because it is a constant roundabout of the same actions. You usually first start off with a cash secured put. If you get assigned, you deploy a covered call, and then if you get assigned your covered call, you just rinse and repeat the process. We'll talk about the wheel strategy in more detail within another episode, again, just to make the most efficient use of your time. The second risk that you could actually face with cash secured puts is assignment, but at expiration. So it's the exact same scenario as the first risk that we talked about, but rather than being assigned earlier or before the expiration date, you get assigned shares of stock at the expiration date. This would ultimately happen if the stock price is lower than the stock price of the put itself, but again, you want to make sure that you have cash available in your account in the case where this type of scenario happens. And again, the only way to kind of work around this risk is to deploy this for stocks that you don't mind holding, which ideally would be reliable companies that are here to stay for the long term. So once you've decided that you want to fix up your financial situation, things can get a little bit confusing because you start asking yourself, okay, where do I start? Should I pay off debt first? Should I start investing, savings? And when it comes down to where to start, things aren't as clear as they should be. And this is exactly why we've written a free ebook called The Financial Blueprint for Canadians. It's actually on our website right now, so check it out. azizzfinance.ca, azizzfinance.ca, and usually it's the first thing that should pop up. Download it. It's literally 20 pages long, but it should give you a good idea of where to start within fixing your financial situation. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your feedback, and give me a shout if you have any questions. All right, now back to the episode. So that you can conduct the wheel strategy without any catastrophic losses. Another risk that you can face with cash secured puts is the fact that the nature of this overall strategy is undefined risk. Now, the nature of option strategies, to kind of touch up on this a little more, are categorized in two different groups, being defined and undefined risk. The former are types of option strategies where you know what your max loss and max profits are going to be, whereas with undefined risk strategies, you only really know what your max profit is because it's capped, or vice versa, whereas the downside is literally unlimited. It's even worse than stock holding because with a stock, you can only really go from whatever you paid to zero. It's even worse than stock holding because with a stock, you can only really go from whatever you paid for the stock to $0, although with undefined risk strategies such as the cash secured put or the covered call, for instance, you're not only susceptible to losing the premium you received, but you can also end up owing money, as your losses can be in the triple digits in terms of percentage. Now, is there a way to kind of avoid this risk? Now, I feel like the only real way that you can avoid this risk, or at least mitigate it, is by deploying proper risk management practices or by hedging with another options contract. Let's first touch up on the deploying of proper risk management practices. Now, this is pretty subjective across the options trader that you ask, although for myself, with undefined risk strategies, I like to use the rule of making sure that only 1 to 5% of my total account size should be used to place these types of strategies. This 1 to 5% would then be considered your position size. And for me personally, I like to backtest my strategies before actually deploying them. So on that sliding scale of 1 to 5%, obviously the higher of a probability of profit from my backtesting, obviously a higher allocation, more towards the 4 to 5%. Whereas something that doesn't really have much of a higher probability of profit, I then lean more towards the 1 to 3% range. When it comes down to calculating position size for undefined risk strategies, it's really just based on whatever the total margin would be held from your broker. So for instance, if they're going to be holding $1,000 of margin for this trade, and I have a total account size of, let's say, $10,000, then that's a 10% of my total account, which means I'm not in the place that I should be trading this or playing this certain strategy or on this specific stock. I'll discuss how I figure out how much I should allocate between the 1 to 5% in another episode, but if you're really impatient and you want to find out, shoot me a message and I'm more than happy to kind of hop on a call with you and clarify this risk management practice a little bit more. And then another thing that we mentioned earlier is hedging. How do you hedge? Now, for cash secured puts specifically, hedging would manifest itself in the form of buying a long call. Doing this will put a limit to the downside that you will face with the strategy and transition it from an undefined risk to a defined risk strategy. Because at this point, not only do you know what your max profit is going to be from your cash secured put, but you also know what your max loss is going to be from the purchase of a long call. The downside to hedging is that it will decrease the premium that you'll end up receiving because you are using this premium to further fund protection for your trade or for the hedge. Alright, Z community, that's pretty much it for today's episode. Now again, if you did find value from this, be sure that you're either following or subscribed to the podcast so that you're up to date with new episodes that are going to come your way. On top of that, if you feel like either your friend, your parents, your grandma, your grandpa are going to benefit from this episode or this overall pod, be sure you swing it their way, because at the end of the day, it could just be a nice little early Christmas gift or something. But nonetheless, guys, it's your boy Azizz Finance signing out. I'll see you guys on the next one.